You're listening to Change Your POV Podcast, episode 49. It was nuts. It was like a whole nother world, man. A whole nother world. Craziness. Yeah, I try not to feel bitter about it, but I was.
Yeah, how many years ago was that?
2004.
Wow, 12 years ago.
Yep.
Look at you harboring it like a little freaking...
I know, like a little bitch, right?
Like a little cuddle bunny.
Wallowing.
Yeah.
Wallowing.
Wallowing like a bitch. Yep. Yep.
Welcome to Change Your POV Podcast, helping you navigate transitions in your life, like entering and exiting college or the military, changing jobs or careers, and providing you with the coaching and mentorship needed to help you advance in your personal or professional life. Sometimes all you need is to change your point of view. Now, here's your host, Eddie Lazary.
All right, let's get this party started. All right, welcome, folks, to Change Your POV Podcast. This is a special episode in many reasons. First, this is the 6th episode in a 6-part series dedicated to, yes, you folks that are active duty military. We covered everything, Bennett and I, in the last several weeks. We covered everything from the I Love Me book in episode 39 to education in episode 41, social media and networking in episode 43, preparing to separate, got 2 episodes, 45 and 47, and then tonight we're going to talk about in episode 49, expectations, what you can expect when you separate from the military. And the second part, this is an important or a very exciting episode, is because we've also brought on Mr. Tim Parkhurst from Cigars and Sea Stories. So I don't even know if this episode should be called Change Your POV. It's really kind of Cigars and Sea Stories with like me, or a part of it, right?
We could call it Warrior Hall as well.
Oh yeah, Warrior Hall. Yes.
Yeah.
So those listeners out there, you may not be familiar, but Bennett and Tim are the founders of Warrior Hall, and you can find out more about them and that organization by heading over to warriorhall.org. Great organization. It's a nonprofit, and they basically help and support. And you guys are starting this other thing here pretty soon. What's it? Warrior Link Ups. So can you just take a minute to describe what that is?
Yeah, so that's a part of Warrior Hall, and it's one of our programs. And because obviously we all sort of have a soft spot in our hearts for entrepreneurship, what we've decided is there's so many veterans out there that are trying to get into some sort of business of their own, whether it's some little cottage industry in their garage, or whether they're actually trying to start some kind of an actual storefront, or maybe they've got what they think is the next big idea or whatever. But the bottom line is there's a lot of guys trying it. We need more to try, because the numbers of veterans getting into entrepreneurship now are so low as compared to our ancestors. The guys that fought World War II, when they came home after the war, 49% of veterans became entrepreneurs. 49%. And now that number is down to, I think, 6% or something. Is that right, Bennett? 6%?
Yeah, it's about 6%.
Yeah, so it's ridiculously low, and there's really no reason why it should be. It's just current society and a lot of things going on. The whole country hasn't been at war. Only the military's been at war over the last decade or so, and so the dynamic is different. But the fact is that those veterans who do get into entrepreneurship have an innate ability to succeed far and above their civilian peers, whether they know it or not. And so we're trying to foster that. And so the Warrior Link Up essentially is just an opportunity to get together in a social setting, not necessarily talk about business, but it could go there. But it's really because Warrior Hall is centered around peer mentoring, peer support. We want to provide opportunities for new veteran entrepreneurs to develop relationships that could turn into a mentoring relationship. Whether you're an old guy that's been around and seen it all, done it all, and reached some level of success, or whether you're the guy that just got out and is trying to get this idea that you had to gel and working hard in your garage to make it happen, but you don't really know what you're doing. Or you could be somewhere in between, and you just come and get together, have a drink, talk, get to know people. And, the hope is that in the process of doing that, number one, you're going to stay connected to your veteran community. Number two, you're going to either be or get a mentor. And number three, we also have the opportunity to bring civilian business leaders into the mix who can help give back and use their vast experience to help our veteran entrepreneurs get going. So
that's awesome.
That's what Warrior Link Ups are all about.
That's cool. So if that sounds, folks out there listening, if that sounds like something you're interested in and like to be a part of, then you can hit up Tim and Bennett. They're all over social media, and you can also connect with them over at warriorhall.org. Cool. So today we're talking about expectations getting out of the military. And Bennett and Tim, you both have a very unique perspective on this because you both actually separated from the military twice. Bennett separated from the Marine Corps and then joined the Army and then separated from the Army. And Tim, you separated from the Marine Corps twice. So you guys are kind of, double experts, I guess. But you've got very unique perspectives on that. And I just kind of want to touch on each of your stories a little bit about what was different between the first from the second and what was similar between the first and the second and challenges that you had with each. So let's start with you, Bennett. Kind of go through briefly your two separations. And I don't really want to talk about kind of how you got out, but more of what did you face once you were out and some of those challenges and some of the things, and was it what you expected or what was, what came about that you didn't really kind of see?
All right. So basically I got out the first time from the Marine Corps in 1996. And I had a job technically working as a stockbroker, or I had to go get my Series 7 first. So I went, got my Series 7, but I had to leave North Carolina where I left a wife and a child behind until I got literally for 30 days. And then my biggest challenge was, all right, so I got that. I didn't really like it per se, but I could make a ton of money. So the biggest challenge, though, was that my wife at the time decided she didn't want to move to New York after I had already passed the Series 7 and gotten this job. So I was like, all right, so I'm just going to, I guess, hang out here and do this for a little bit, and decided not only that I didn't like it, but then it sucked being away from my daughter and my wife. Well, so about 6 to 8 months later, I moved back to Wilmington, North Carolina, quit the job that I was being quite successful at. And, being there only that amount of time, I was already making, $6,000 to $8,000 a month. But then, so I went back to pretty much nothing except for my wife and my daughter. And lo and behold, my marriage was crumbling. And I jumped from job to job. I became a cop for a little while. Then I got a job, tried to sell insurance for a while. Then I got a job as loss prevention at a department store. And then finally, it turned out that we were going to get a divorce. And then I was like, you know what, I'm just going to go back to what I know. So that was my first transition. And it was an epic failure, pretty much. Because I was miserable the whole time. Didn't know why, but I was miserable. I was angry. I was just pissed off all the time because I felt like I didn't fit in, even though I tried to, do the dance and play the game. Either way, it just sucked. So then I went back in the Army in 1998. I was back in there until 2003. Got out. This time I had actually learned from my first thing is that I needed a solid job. And the woman who is now my wife, at that point where we were dating, I kind of was like, all right, so what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? What do you want to stay? You know what I mean? I thought about her in my decision making, because at the end of the day, the first time, I just did what I wanted to do and I thought was right. And I figured, oh, well, she'll follow me. Well, that's
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily the case. So I got a job in the nuclear industry, which was great, solid job, but it didn't start for a few months. So I got a job selling cars for a while, and that paid the bills. But again, it kind of sucked. And then I got the job, in nuclear security. I stayed in it for 11 years, and frankly, the only years that I liked it were about the first two. Other than shooting guns on the range a lot, the rest of the job was just sheer drudgery. And they pay you a lot of money, but you're bored out of your gourd. And literally, they just pay you for what you might have to do, not for what you're actually doing, which breeds a lot of, I mean, literally the people that I worked with, it was like, old ladies getting together playing cribbage every night because the amount of like shit talking and just what is that called, gossip, was just asinine. You get that many guys together and basically volunteer. It's almost like being a prison guard. You voluntarily lock yourself in a hole for 12 hours a day, and then it's so. I mean, you can say, "Well, it was me," but I was making like I said, I was making really good money, but at the end of the day, money doesn't make you happy. And I don't know any guys that are out there still that are happy doing that job. They're happy with their paychecks, but they're not happy with what they're doing. So that ended me up basically at a point where it got to a point where I lost it. And all of my, all the crap that I had been pushing down for literally 15 years, I was pushing stuff down from back in my Marine Corps time that I just hadn't dealt with. Emotional stuff, post-traumatic stress, if you want to say that, just injuries and all this other stuff that I had not dealt with came rushing back. And I say that I had a breakdown, because I basically did, for lack of a better way of describing it. And I was out of commission for a few months and then decided to just leave the job that I was in after I got back to a point where I had gone to therapy and this and that and the other thing, and felt like I had got my head on straight. So I left that job making a ton of money, and then going into a job that did make a ton of money. But emotionally, emotionally, I'm so much in a better place. And you know what? We make the money work. So I guess that's my story.
And share with us kind of your two experiences.
Yeah, so, I got out of the Marine Corps after a little bit of reserve time and followed by 4 years of an active duty period. I bounced around a lot. I went reserve, active, back to reserves, got out, back to reserves, and then finally active duty for 16 additional years to finish it out. But bottom line is I did my initial active duty tour as a grunt. I was out at Camp Pendleton, California. Got married right before I got out. Didn't want to go where they were going to send me as a Marine. And so I was kind of looking forward to just, hey, screw this. They don't want to let me do what I want to do. So I'm going to do my own thing. No education, no money saved up, had a little bit of debt, brand new marriage, all this kind of stuff. Really well prepared, I guess. And so I got out in 1993 in April and went home to Kansas City. And, there's a lot of military folks around, but you don't know where they are unless you go look for them. And at the time, I wasn't of a mindset to want to go look for them. I didn't have any kind of a transition. I remember going to a class at the base theater for a few days, but I don't remember anything about it or, what they talked about or whatever. And I thought, hey, I'm a young NCO. I'm a sergeant. I was a platoon sergeant in a sniper platoon. And, I had combat tour. And, by God, if I can lead Marines, then I can do anything. Right. And So I got out there and proceeded to get kicked in the crotch on a pretty regular basis by the world who didn't agree. And, things like degrees meant stuff. Cops in my area had to have a degree or you're not going to get hired. And not that I necessarily wanted to be a cop at that point. That's what I ended up doing towards the end of that 5-year period. But my first year, I had 10 different jobs in that first year. And the economy then was very much like it is now. It was pretty depressed, and sort of a big recession going on. Unemployment was kind of high, and so there was work, but then they would lay people off, and there wouldn't be any work for a while. And so the company I was working with would just kind of keep me on the rolls, but we weren't doing anything, and so I wasn't making money. So I have to go find another job, and then do that over and over and over again. And after a while, that got pretty old. I think the low point for me there was probably when I went to go apply for a job at Garmin Electronics. I didn't realize that their world headquarters was right there in Overland Park, Kansas. So I'm driving down the highway and I see this building. It says Garmin. I'm like, oh shit! I use their products. I know what Garmin is. So I went in and started filling out an application. It was late in the day on a Friday, so people were getting ready to leave, and I was halfway through my application when some guy in a suit walked in, and turns out, as I found out later, he was one of the vice presidents of the company, and he asked me what I was doing and what I hoped to do there at Garmin. And I said, well, I'm not really sure, but and we talked for a little bit, and was interested in my background as a Marine, and we started walking around, and he showed me different parts of the facility, and we walked into the R&D place, where they try new things and all this kind of stuff. And I had some ideas about user interface for some of their products that might have helped. So anyway, we got back to the HR office where I was filling out my application, and he just walked me up to the window and told the lady behind the desk to, hey, I think we can go ahead and have him come in on Monday and see how this works out. And I was like, wow, this is cool, And so he starts to leave, and just before he walks out the door, he turns around and he goes, oh, forgot to ask, where did you go to school? And I told him where I went to high school, right? And he said, no, I meant college. And I said, well, I didn't go to college. And he goes, oh, he gets this look on his face, and I'm like, I know what's coming, because I've heard it before. And I'm like, you're a vice president, dude. You can't do something about this. And he's like, man, I'm sorry, that we can't do it. And I was like, wow, that sucks. So here's a vice president of the company, walks me around and personally wants to hire me. And then he tells me he can't because I don't have a degree. So needless to say, I was pretty dejected that day. Filed bankruptcy in '94. Was horrible to my wife. Had my first daughter in 1995, and probably wasn't the best dad. I was angry. I was distracted. I was unfocused, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And so I just jumped from thing to thing for 5 years, basically. Eventually, I had the good sense to try to get back in the Marine Corps, and they were stupid enough to let me. So I came back in 1998 as a parachute rigger. Finished out my 16 years, to retire, and it wasn't until just the last couple of years of that I started thinking about, I really had a bad time that first time around. I probably don't want to do that again. And I was lucky enough to have a couple of experiences dealing with other folks through another nonprofit that I worked with, starting back in 2012. And, this one guy was a former Marine, and I was talking to him on the phone, never actually met him in person. But he was all jacked up. He was abusing drugs. His brains were kind of scrambled because of that. He had, some different mental health issues and things like that. And the thing is, he had a good heart. He wanted to be a better person. He wanted to be useful in society. He wanted to do all these things, but he didn't have the capacity to, and he was already so damaged, and he wasn't getting any help. And the more he talked, the more I saw myself in him. I don't think I was, obviously not nearly as broken as he was, but I very much saw, kind of a reflection of myself in our conversations. And some other things happened around that time that made me seriously think about going to see a counselor, which I did. That helped a lot. Kind of showed me some things that I didn't realize about myself. And the bottom line is, I had been a horrible, horrible person to my wife and family, to my friends, to coworkers in the Marine Corps, to my Marines for a long time. And it was because of things that happened to me during my first tour that I never dealt with, never acknowledged that they were issues. Didn't even think about PTSD. I mean, Panama Desert Storm, that time frame, nobody talked about that stuff. And when I got out, certainly nobody talked about, oh yeah, when you get out, you should go claim PTSD with the VA or whatever and go see a shrink. Nobody thought like that back then. And bottom line is, so I did the lion's share of my career after having gone through these things. And I basically, when I got out the first time, all this stuff started coming out of the box and I started to unravel. Going back into the Marine Corps kind of helped me because it was a familiar environment. It helped me put things back into a box for long enough to get to retirement and, go back to civilian life again. But as soon as, once I started getting close to retirement, I started to realize that it's all coming out of the box again. And I'm going to start to unravel if I don't do something to fix this. And so I did, so I started seeing a counselor. I met Bennett, got a couple other friends that I speak to pretty regularly that kind of, keep me straight, hold me accountable, kind of keep me sane. And, I think the thing that really has helped me the most is, two things. One, finding a mission. And number two is staying connected to my veteran community, guys that have been where I've been. And, I didn't do that the first time around. Didn't do either one of them, didn't even try. And I didn't recognize that I even had issues. If I had not been able to come back in, I probably would be a statistic on a paper somewhere. But this time around was a little shaky too. Tried my hand at school last semester. Had a little bit of an issue in mid semester, but things are better now, and I'm not going to worry about being a student anymore.
I did. I probably didn't help with that any at all. Just saying, full disclosure.
No, you're good, man. But it was, it's tough. It's always tough. If you have things that you need to deal with, you have to deal with them. You can't. That was kind of the big lesson I learned. You can't just put it on the back burner. You can't put it in its box for another 15 or 20 years after the fact and then deal with it. You've got to deal with it. And so, yeah.
So let me talk. All right. So, we all know, right? We've been on both sides of these fences, and you guys have been on both sides multiple times each. And so, somewhere out there right now, there's some active duty, fucking cockstrong, non-commissioned officer that's just, in his prime, is the best at what he does. Highly decorated, highly respected, a good leader, a good, Marine, a good soldier, a good airman, a good whatever. Um, the world is their oyster basically. And then they get out, or they're going to get out here soon, and they're going to be hit with a very huge wake up call. And that is, and this, I think we can all speak from experience here, and that is that folks on the outside they don't, necessarily appreciate the work that we did. A lot of it is because they don't understand the work that we did while we're in the military. The leadership skills aren't valued as highly as we might think they should be. There's just all these rush of emotions. I know you guys experienced, I experienced, and I know a lot of people that we speak to all the time experience, and I hear things all the time like, fear. They have, a lot of people have a sense of fear when they get out, when they realize that they're not as well equipped to deal with the outside world as they might thought they were when they were in, things like uncertainty and loss and lack of purpose. And there's so many different emotions and experiences, and of course there isn't a one size fits all. There isn't a checklist, so to speak, that you're going to end up, that we can hand out to people as they're exiting and say, okay, here are all the things that you're going to experience when you get out. Everybody is going to experience their own thing during their own time frame, and sometimes it takes a while for a lot of that to kind of sink in. It could be even years, after you get out. So what I really want to kind of dive into a little bit is kind of all of these emotions, and what type of emotions folks getting out can come to expect, why we think people experience those emotions, and then I'd like to touch on Nick's message. Tim, you went to a conference not that long ago, was put on by Raider Project, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's
And I want to get that link to put into the show notes of this episode so people can go and actually listen to the message by Nick himself. I think it's a very powerful message that
okay.
everyone that's getting out really needs to watch and listen to and pay attention to. But before we go down there, let's just kind of talk about all these different emotions, and it's very similar to kind of Nick's message in that you go through all these different sets of emotions. It's almost like when you have a major loss in your whether the different degrees or different of grief, right? They got different
like
fear and
stages. Yeah.
yeah, stages of grief when you lose somebody in your family. And getting out of the military, it's almost like you go through those same emotions, those same experiences as losing like a member of your family, because in a lot of ways, in a lot of senses, you're losing a big part of your identity. You're losing a big part of your family, close friends. You're losing that support structure. You're losing that sense of, I know when I get up tomorrow, I know what I'm going to go do because everything's kind of laid out for me. And I know what I do on Mondays, and I know what I do on Fridays, and I know what I do on the weekends, and I know where I go for sick call, and everything is known. And then you get out, and a lot of that goes away. So let's just kind of talk about. We can talk about experiences we've had individually, or even experiences that we've heard about speaking with other veterans that have gotten out.
I know for me, the biggest emotion that I felt for quite a while was just freaking I was angry and I didn't know why. And the other thing is really just being lost. Kind of having that I didn't quite know where I belong. And even though I was with, especially when I got out the second time, I was with a whole bunch of other veterans that worked there. Uh, and the camaraderie might have been there. It was just not right. And I think a lot of it is just because it was not what I needed. Because I think what guys need to understand is that you really have to find out what you need and what you want, and really go after that. To not allow society or people to tell you what is best for you when you know what's best for you. And if you don't, then you need to go on a journey to figure that out. I guess that's, for me, that was the biggest thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I was honestly mad at Nick briefly, Nick Kumilatzos, Raider Project. When he did the transition seminar and he gave his talk, he was just the introductory speaker. All the things that he spoke about got delved into in greater detail by some of the folks that he brought on board to present. And I knew Nick. I knew him, back in 2007, 2008 timeframe, when I was over in Okinawa. And he said he talked about some things that he had been thinking about even that far back. And I connected with him again probably over a year ago in the Camp Lejeune area, and he never told me any of the things that he put out in his speech at the seminar. And I was like, Nick, you know me for a while. How come you're keeping this stuff a secret, And I was kind of pissed, but I'm glad he came out with it. It's great stuff. And the reason I was kind of upset is nobody in any phase of either of my transitions ever spoke the words that he spoke and put it into such clear perspective. Um, and basically he kind of broke it down into 7 stages, for a transition. And the thing that, if you're going to go and watch his video, and hear how he describes the transition process, you need to understand up front that these things happen basically in order. There's 7 steps, and they essentially happen in order, but they can go back. You can go back and forth. So you get to number 3 and you can, or number 4, and then you might go back to number 3, or you can get to number 5 and go back to 4, or so on. Or you could have 3 and 4 and 5 happening concurrently. So just something to stick in the back of your brain when you watch the video. But so the stages, obviously, you're starting to get out. You're worried, you're apprehensive, whatever. You're still in uniform, but you don't know what's on the other side of the Great Divide, right? Then you have excitement that you're dealing with. The day you retire or the day you get out, it's like, woohoo, I'm gone. And he says that's the shortest stage. And I know for me it was both times. I remember the first time I got out, that whole excitement thing lasted for maybe a couple of weeks. And then I realized, man, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't have any money. I don't want to go and live with my mom. And 90 days after I got out, I called back to my old unit and talked to my first sergeant and said, hey, can you get me back in the Marine Corps? I mean, that's how short-lived it was. And, so yeah, the excitement thing doesn't last very long. But then step 3 is, there's this whole range of emotions. And he'll talk about apathy, indifference, being detached, unmotivated, anger, bitterness, all these different things. And you may feel some of them, you may not feel others, or you may feel all of them. You may feel some others that aren't even on the list. I know at different times I kind of went through probably all of those. But that's the long phase. That's the part that is really the struggle to get through. But those things lead to depression, where you feel depressed, or you may even become clinically depressed if you don't take care of all those other feelings. We get all these feelings, but what do you do with them? If you have a constructive outlet, if you reconnect with your tribe, or if you find a mission for yourself, then a lot of those emotions can be dealt with in a constructive way. The problems occur when we don't, or we're just not equipped to, or we don't have anybody walking alongside us to help us, and we just start spiraling. And guys get frustrated that they don't see any light at the end of the tunnel, and everything is just not coming together. And it's not because people aren't killing themselves because they have PTSD or some other diagnosis. They're killing themselves because they are disconnected and they're alone and nothing is working. And that's when you get into that depression that causes guys to commit suicide.
In order to suppress a lot of that depression, or try to make that feeling of hurt and loss and pain and anger kind of numbed a little bit, they turn to substance abuse, drugs, and alcohol.
Self-medicating.
And then that becomes, that just exacerbates the issue. That may help us feel better right in the moment, but that leads to other issues, bigger issues, and then in a lot of cases leads to folks making really poor decisions while they're under the influence of these self-medicated products. So it's a snowball effect. And a lot of folks that I know that have dealt with this, they're not standing on the rooftops shouting at the top of their lungs that they've got problems. A lot of them try to hide and conceal these issues and feelings that they're facing, and to some degree even trying to conceal a lot of their substance abuse, to the point where finally it can't be hidden anymore because something happens, they break, or something even bigger or greater happens that really kind of rips them out of that closet, so to speak, and now they're left
Yeah.
with having these huge holes in their life that they've created for themselves, whether it's drunken driving accident that injures or kills somebody too. And here's the other thing too that I get really upset about, and you see it a lot on social media, and those if you're a veteran, hit like, if you recognize what this is or whatever. I saw a bunch of them recently that says, you're a veteran if you've had the prerequisite, divorce, and like a checklist of all of these things. Like if you're an alcoholic and you've been divorced, and everybody kind of gets a big old chuckle out of that. But you know what? It doesn't have to be that way. Just because you get out of the military, it doesn't mean you have to suffer from symptoms of PTSD. It doesn't mean you have to suffer from depression. It doesn't mean you have to turn to, drugs and alcohol. It doesn't mean you have to, check the box. You don't have to get a divorce. You don't have to be a shitty father to your
Yeah.
kids.
Yeah.
But, and it just, some people see that as a badge of honor, or, been there, done that. I got the t-shirt or something. At the end of the day, nobody really likes that. Even if they're in that spot in their life right now, they don't want to be there. They may joke about it, but they don't want to be there.
Yeah.
So what advice do you have for folks to, when they first get out, to what can people do when they get out to avoid being in that place or getting to that place before it's too late? And then what are some things that people that may be listening to this that find themselves in that place, what can they do to get out?
Well, one thing that Nick talks about in the video, and I don't want to steal his thunder, but I experienced this myself when I was on active duty. I'd already gotten out once before, so I kind of had been through this. And then towards the end of my career, I started to reflect back on that time and started to learn some things about it. And I was actually seeing my peers, and I was a master sergeant, an E8, so a senior staff NCO. I was seeing some of my peers giving advice to young Marines who were about to get out and go be civilians, and telling them what they should or shouldn't do. And I would ask them, I'd be like, so, did you ever have broken time? Did you get out before? No, man, I came in and I've been in ever since. Well, how do you know, because we're not talking about just general, be good, don't get in trouble, or whatever. We're talking specific things, that they're telling them to do. Like go out and apply for Social Security disability or something like that when the kid is clearly not disabled, um, just different things like that, creating a victim mentality in some cases, or whatever. But the point is, if you're still in uniform and you've never gotten out before, you don't know what the transition process is. And I know that there's going to be a whole bunch of guys who hear this that are in uniform right now that are saying, yeah, whatever. I'm telling you, you don't know. Because when I was in uniform before I got out the first time, I didn't know. And even after 5 years of being out and coming back in, I still didn't know what the hell happened to me. I knew that it wasn't good. I knew that I shouldn't stay out because things weren't going well, but I had no idea what happened and why. And having a couple of decades to reflect on it and learn from my experience, um, and prepare for a second go at this transition thing, I can see very clearly now that you may not have PTSD, you may not ever get clinically depressed, you may not have any of the major, big issues, that are going to land you in jail or ruin your life or anything like that. But you may well be miserable, and you may well go through some struggles that you don't necessarily have to go through just because you're not aware that they're going to happen. And that's why I kind of wanted to read through the stages of transition that Nick lays out, and I really highly encourage everybody to go to radarproject.org and check out the transition seminar. He's got a link on programs, and you just click on Raider Project Transition Seminar, and his intro video is right down there by his picture, and you can also find it on YouTube. But
yeah, I'm going to have it on the show notes of this episode too.
Yeah, that'll be awesome. But this whole thing, the apathy, the indifference, the detachment. Another way of saying that is isolation. That's one of the biggest killers of veterans is isolation. It doesn't matter if you're a new guy just getting out, or if you're a Vietnam veteran that's got out in '67, and has had a full life since then. Whatever time, whatever period in your life that you choose to isolate yourself, and for whatever reason, something may have triggered something in you that now, after all these years, you're going to isolate. The effect is going to be the same. It's going to be bad. And that's why guys are killing themselves, because they're isolated. And
well, so Tim, real quick, let's put some brackets around that term isolation, because I don't want people to get confused. Isolation is not the same as being alone, like living alone or being on the street and not having anybody in your life. You can easily be married and have kids and have family surrounding you and still be isolated, right?
yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And, we talked about the self-medication. That's part of isolating yourself. You start pushing people away from you. You may come home at the end of a work day, working your new job as a civilian, and you may have a wife, you may have kids coming home from school. Hey, daddy, how are you? And you may be totally and completely, utterly isolated at the same time. And at the end of the day, when the kids are in bed and your wife goes to bed, you're sitting in the living room, drinking a bottle of scotch, you're isolating yourself. And, you don't necessarily have to be getting into substance abuse or anything like that. You can just do it emotionally. You can just emotionally isolate yourself to the point where you, even with people around you all day, every day, you feel alone. And that's the isolation. When nobody knows what's going on in your head because you don't tell them, you're isolated.
So a lot of guys
I'm right here in the other room, Tim. You don't have to talk about me like
Yeah.
So a lot of guys that are I say guys, but I'm seriously meaning that, not generally, like I'm talking guys, gals, whoever,
Sure.
get out of the military and they find them, if they're in this isolation kind of point in their life, a lot of times they're in that place and they can't recognize it for themselves. So what are some things for folks that may be listening to this, that may be some indicators to them to kind of maybe alert them that they may be in this place and they not even realize it themselves?
Well, the way you phrase the question, that's a tough one. I
Well,
guess.
so here's one. I'll just kind of kick it off and say, I found myself in that place and didn't realize I was there. And one thing that I found odd was people in my life started to say things to me like, "What's wrong with you? You're different. What's the matter?" Like I got that a lot from a lot of people, and at the time I didn't know what it was. Now I do. Now I know it was because I was in that point of isolation and I was acting different. I was different. I wasn't the same person, and people were calling me on it, but I just kind of blew it off when I really should have probably taken heed to some of those comments.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I know that, thank God you heeded the words and at some point came to a realization that you were isolating yourself and doing things that were not constructive or productive for your life. Not everybody will necessarily do that or be able to do that. One of the things that Nick said in the seminar, and he did it right on the stage in front of the audience. He said, if you're one of the guys in the audience who is just now doing their transition or getting ready to transition, I'm going to tell you right now that you may feel like committing suicide. It may be 6 months from now. It might be a couple of years from now. It might be a decade from now. There, I said it. And he said, you know what just happened? He said, I took the power away from that emotion, that feeling, the depression, or the desire to just end it because you don't see any other way out. Because
Mm-hmm.
when it happens, those people that were in that room will think to themselves, oh my God, a year ago, Nick Kumalaso stood on the stage and said that I was going to feel like that. Holy crap, you know? And oh, by the way, this is why he said I was going to feel like that. And then when they get to thinking about it, they're going to realize, oh, and this is what he said I can do about it, you know? So when you prepare the mind, you know, we talk about resiliency all the time when we're in uniform, when we're on active duty, you know, before we go on deployments, we have resiliency classes and things like that, and talk about mental toughness and all this kind of stuff. Well, the same thing applies for your transition. You've got to be resilient. And the only way you're going to be is if you know and understand ahead of time the things that could happen to you. If you try to live in a fantasy world where, oh, this isn't going to happen to me. You know, I'm a Naval Academy grad or a West Point grad, you know, and I was a commander of troops and I was this or I was a sergeant major. You know, this isn't going to happen to me. Well, that's crap, because you're a human. You know, you're a human being and you went through things that, or you just lived a certain way within the parameters of a military lifestyle. And now the next day, you know, one day after you retire or get out, that's gone. It's just gone. It doesn't exist anymore. So the whole framework for your adult life has disappeared, and now you're living in a different framework that you have yet to figure out. But if you've had a conversation with someone where they told you that these things could happen to you, then when they do, that won't be a big surprise, and you'll be better prepared to deal with it.
Right. Wow, man, we could literally talk about this for forever, because it's such an important part of really what we do, the three of us and a lot of folks out there that are in our space, you know, trying to help veterans and those people that are transitioning out of the military. And there is a problem. There is a problem with, you know, suicide among veterans, and you hit the nail on the head. And it isn't because of PTSD. It's because of everything that we're talking about tonight. And I just wanted to thank you both for coming on and kind of opening up those doors. Obviously, we didn't cover everything A to Z, but we at least open the doors to those that are approaching separation from the military to know that, hey, guess what? You're going to, not maybe, you will be faced with challenges. They're going to be unique to each and every one of you. It's not going to be easy. There are, you know, ways you can mitigate some of that pain, and it's by getting connected. It's about seeking, you know, help. It's about, you know, opening up and you know, being part of a community and finding something to be, you know, a part of, and finding your tribe again. And again, just, you know, in the show notes of this page, there'll be a link to Nick's video. You can go in and watch that. He says it the best, says it better than what we could do here today. But we're just going to bring awareness to that community. We wish all of you the best of luck as you transition out of the military. And if anyone at any point in their transition has any questions or you know, fears about anything, you can feel free to get in contact with any one of us, and we'll be more than happy to kind of help reach our hands out to you and assist in any way possible. And if we don't know the answers, we definitely have enough people amongst the three of us in our network to be able to point you in the right direction. So use us as a resource. We're offering our assistance to you as veterans. And at the end of the day, veterans have to help other veterans, because you're just not going to get it from anyone else. You know, that's been my experience anyway. So I hate to cut this short, but I've got to wrap it up and get this thing, you know, buttoned up for tomorrow's release. Thanks, Bennett. Thanks, Tim. I appreciate you guys coming out, and I look forward to doing more of these types of collaborative podcast episodes in the future.
Anytime, brother.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Yep. You can find everything that we talked about and that video from Nick at the show notes page of this episode over at changeyourpov.com/episode 49. Never miss an episode. Hit subscribe on your podcast player of choice. We have a lot more great content headed your way. If you want to reach out to me directly, you can email me at eddie@changeyourpov.com. If you want to reach Bennett or Tim, you can reach them at warriorhall.org. Until next time.
Thanks for listening to Change Your POV podcast with Eddie Lazary. Check out more content by going to changeyourpov.com. And remember, your ability and willingness to change your point of view will open doors of opportunity.
Yay.
Thanks, gentlemen.
Yeah, man. Get to
Thank you, dude.
I get to editing.
Yeah, I'm.
It's pretty clean, actually, though. I think
It is. I'm not doing a whole lot of editing. I'm just going to throw the end caps on and the, ID3 tags and all that fun
we've
shit.
done this a few times, I think. So I think
Yeah.
it seems like we're getting better at it. So
Yeah. Cool.
all
Very
right.
cool,
All right.
man.
You guys have a good night. Play patty cake, whatever you guys
Yeah,
do.
it's fun. It's fun.
Ooh,
right.
let's do that. That sounds good.
Patty cake, patty cake.
You both have daughters, so you know exactly how to play that
Oh
game.
my
I'm
God,
so
it's so sad. It's so sad. That's right.
Lots of estrogen in our house.
Lots of lots.
awesome.
All right, man.
All right. Thanks.
All right.
Hey, take care.
Bye.